everybody, I'm Vera Stewart and welcome to the VeryVera Show. You know, this season I am having such a great time introducing you to Southern ingredients and Southern techniques. We've done pecans, bacon, apples, and this week we're doing one of my absolute favorites, sweet potato. You know, sweet potatoes are not actually a potato or a yam. They're a root vegetable. So we're going to do 3 recipes today that I think you'll really like for this time of year, might be seen on your Thanksgiving table. We're going to start with a sweet potato biscuit. It has a honey pecan butter. It will melt in your mouth. Then we'll move into my sweet potato casserole that was actually in my cookbook. And then finally, the sweet potato layer cake. This recipe is divine. Could be the new dessert that you introduce to your family. And in Vera's Corner today, we're going to be going over mixing techniques. So let's get started with those biscuits. You know, so many times I think we kind of shy away from things that we're not that familiar with, and maybe biscuits is one of those because it's just easy to pick them up at the store. But this recipe is so easy. And for Thanksgiving this year and during the holidays, you need to kind of spread your wings and maybe try something that you've not done before. This recipe actually uses a biscuit mix, so it's very easy. Just stick with me. We're going to walk our way through this. So the first thing you do when you're measuring flour or biscuit mix in a recipe, so important to get that as an accurate measurement. So you want to spoon the biscuit mix or flour into your dry measuring cup, and then just take a knife and go across the top and then do a clean sweep, and that is what is called a level measurement. So be sure to do that. I know a lot of times I'll get in a hurry and I'll put that whole measuring cup down in the box of the mix or the flour, and that's packing it, and that's not right. So do it that way. So then the next thing I did was I added cinnamon and sugar to my biscuit mix. So now the ingredients are all coming together. This is going to be so yummy. So the next thing I did was I went and cut some of my butter into little cubes. You get that really, really cold, add that in, and then either take a pastry blender or 2 sharp knives, and you want to blend that into your flour mixture until it looks like coarse meal or little peas in the flour like that. So that's the perfect combination of that butter into that mix. All right, so now I've got my mashed potatoes, my mashed sweet potatoes, and this is real easy. I love to use just a plain potato masher to do it. I'm going to add that to my buttermilk. So this is piquing your interest, I'm sure, because this time of year, all of these flavors and ingredients are just amazing. So I'm going to add this, just stir it about just long enough to get it incorporated. And then I like to build like a little well in the center where I'm going to pour this mixture. All right, so there we go. And buttermilk will also react to the leavening agents in the biscuit mix. So that's one of the reasons. That is the liquid. Okay, so now I'm just going to lightly incorporate that. Just fold it around, because the more you handle dough, the firmer it becomes, and we really want these to be light and fluffy. So once you feel like you've gotten all the ingredients moistened, then I'm going to actually divide this dough in half and work with half at a time. You know, if you're an expert biscuit maker, you probably don't have to do that, but it just does make it easier if you take a manageable amount at one time. All right. So let's move this over and get my flour. I'm going to flour my board. And then I'm going to take half of this mixture, and we're going to knead it for like 4 or 5 times. And just keep that flour handy so you can wipe your fingers off as you go. All right, you don't even have to use a rolling pin for this recipe. So all I'm doing is just kind of kneading it just long enough to get it to all come together. Add some more flour if needed. And now I'm going to pat it down to about 3/4 of an inch. Now to that same flour, I'm going to put my 2.5 inch biscuit cutter, and if you flour it well, you don't even have to turn it. And if you turn it, here again, you're going to seal the edges, and one of the things you want to make sure is that those edges are nice and tender when it bakes. So the other question that we get asked all the time is, do you separate them or do you put them close together? And we like to say that a biscuit needs a buddy. So you're going to put them on the pan and let them sit side by side. So I should be able to get about 20 biscuits out of this recipe. They're going to go into a 425-degree oven for about 15 minutes. They're going to get nice and golden brown. Then we're going to be making the honey butter to go with it. And after the break, we're going to get started on that sweet potato casserole that definitely needs to be on your table during the holidays. So come back with me in just a few minutes and we'll get started on that. Okay, welcome back everybody, and if you're just joining me today, we are doing sweet potatoes. Everything there is to know about a sweet potato and 3 great recipes to go with it. So the aroma in here is fantastic right now. Those sweet potato biscuits are just looking so great in the oven. I cannot wait. You know, you can put a little melted butter on the top while they're baking. If you want to open up the oven like that last minute and brush them with some butter, that's great. But we're actually doing a honey-pecan butter to go with those. So those are going to be scrumptious. All right, so sweet potato casserole. This is a recipe, one of my favorites in our cookbook. And it's so great this time of year because, you know, you're thinking about what goes well with turkey and just fall and the fact that sweet potatoes are in season. You know, one of the things I also want to mention is the fact that you just keep sweet potatoes out on the counter. If you refrigerate them, that's going to compromise the integrity of the sweet potatoes. So just leave them out on the counter and they will be just perfect for you using the recipes. All right, so I have mashed the sweet potatoes. We got those boiled until the fork went in, really nice and moist and just perfect temperature. And then I just used a potato masher to get those to this consistency right here. Now the ingredients that go into the casserole are granulated sugar, vanilla, I've got a beaten egg, and these are already cooled down so that egg is not going to cook, and then half and half. All right, so I'm just going to whisk this together. And I have gone ahead and buttered my casserole dish. So I love to use butter when I'm doing that. And you know, you have that little piece left. Sometimes a recipe will call for, you know, a half a stick or 2/3 of a stick of butter, and you have little pieces left. Well, I just keep a Ziploc bag in the refrigerator. And when I need to butter a pan or, you know, any little bit of butter for some reason, I always have some in my little Ziploc bag. All right, so let's move that casserole dish over. It's already nicely buttered. And I'm just gonna add this mixture in. And this recipe calls for like a square pan, but this is kind of a skinny oblong pan that's new. We found this recently, and I thought it would be perfect for this. All right, so let's just get that evenly distributed in the pan. And then what makes this, you know, everybody has their favorite sweet potato recipe. It's kind of like green beans. Do you like the round ones or the flat ones? So for this particular recipe, we're going to do a streusel on the top, and we call it a praline. So this calls for flour. We've got Pearson Farms pecans, which are literally straight off the tree right now. We have cinnamon, brown sugar, and I'm going to mix that together just with a fork, and then I'm going to pour my melted butter in. And this is going to go on the top, and at this point you can either freeze this or you can bake it. So it can be frozen to be baked later, but this is just going to be right on the top. And you know, one of the things that I want to mention for some of you that are new to VeryVera, we had a mail order division of our company. We shipped our cakes and casseroles all over the United States. And we had a package that you could buy during the holidays. It was called Everything But the Turkey. So you were responsible for cooking the turkey, but we would send you everything else. And this was actually part of that package, was that you could get the sweet potato casserole from us along with some other really good things. All right, so in Vera's Corner today, we're gonna go over mixing techniques. And then when we come back, you know, I'm also kind of noted for my layer cakes. So we really have thought out of the box this time to come up with a layer cake that uses sweet potatoes in the batter. So come back with us in just a few minutes and I'll get this popped in the oven. Vera's Corner is brought to you by TaxSlayer. Mixing is an important part of baking. Let me give you some tips today that will make sure that you use the proper technique to ensure that your baking is successful. For muffins, make sure you mix your dry and wet ingredients separately, then fold them together gently. Clumps are expected. Avoid over-mixing or your batter will form too much gluten and you won't get a nice rounded top. If you're making a pastry or biscuit, begin by cutting your butter into your flour and then add your other dry ingredients. Add liquid and fold together with a wooden spoon or your hands. Your dough should look shaggy. However, the consistency will vary slightly depending on the biscuit or pastry that you're making. If you have read any of my recipes, you know that creaming is key to achieve a light and airy cake or cookie texture. The secret is to let all of your cold ingredients come to room temperature. Cream your butter and sugar for 5 minutes when baking cookies. You should see no sugar granules and your batter should look fluffy. Add your eggs, then slowly add your dry ingredients. If you're making a bundt cake, cream your butter and sugar for 20 minutes and then alternate by adding in your dry and wet ingredients. My tip, mix wet ingredients in a liquid measuring cup for ease of pouring. Use these tips next time you bake to have everyone thinking you are a professional. Start free today at taxslayer.com. Welcome back, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed Vera's Corner today. Mixing techniques are really important. And, you know, there's one technique that I didn't mention in the mini, and it's because we've done it so much on the show today, and that is mashing the sweet potatoes. So hopefully you'll take those tips and go with that while you're doing all of your mixing and baking during the holidays coming up. All right, so last week I did an apple butter pound cake that I've had so many comments about how spectacular that cake is and how much people are loving the recipe. So we had to top that this week, and so we're doing a sweet potato layer cake. It has all the great flavors of fall in it, and it just turns out so beautifully. And you know, I've done layer cakes so many times on the show, but there are always new people watching. So I want you to learn how to ice one of the VeryVera cakes too. All right, so I had a little bit to do in advance to be ready for this. So let me go over what I've already done in my steps. So I went ahead and got my potatoes boiled. It takes about 45 minutes until they're fork tender, and you want to then let them cool and then peel them and mash them. All right, the next thing was that I melted my butter in my under-counter Wolf microwave. This is one of my favorite pieces of equipment from Wolf. Then I've lined my 3 9-inch layer pans with my parchment paper and sprayed it with my Baker's Joy. And you know, these pans are part of the original bakery of VeryVera. That's why they look so weathered. And honestly, the more you cook in them, the better they get. And then I had all of my dry ingredients that needed to be incorporated. So we had cake flour, baking powder, baking soda, cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, and salt, all of the things that make this cake so fantastic. And then once I've incorporated those, then I wanted to put that into my sifter and get it very incorporated so you've got all that air that's in those dry ingredients. And I've set that aside. Now I've taken my KitchenAid mixer and I have combined my brown sugar and my granulated white sugar, room temperature butter and oil, vanilla into this bowl, and I've beat that for about 3 minutes until it's light and fluffy. So this is all ready to go. And you know, in all of this process, one of the things I want to point out is people are talking about the linen aprons I'm wearing on the show. And one of the reasons I love this apron so much is that my handy towel, there's a little handle to keep this. This is my Studio Petro apron. I just love it. All right, so now I'm going to take my room temperature eggs, add those into my mashed potatoes, and just whisk this together. Look how vibrant and orange that mashed sweet potato is too. And you know, there's a little bit of difference in baking and boiling in terms of incorporating the color. So you are going to get a more vibrant orange if you boil it as opposed to baking. So keep that in mind for whatever the use. Either one works really. All right, so now this is ready to go into my mixer. And again, that's a light and fluffy batter. When you are mixing the butter and the sugars and everything together, it's not gonna seem like batter yet because you don't have any of the dry ingredients in it. But incorporating it, I think I might have said 3 minutes, it's actually 5. But our recipes are always available on our website at VeryVera.com. So this is one I certainly hope you'll try. And we love to hear from you. Which recipes are you trying and what do you like? All right, so this is going to start going around. It's just going to get incorporated. And I always use my little handy 1/3 cup measuring cup when I start incorporating my other ingredients. I'm going to turn this down just a little bit because that flour is going all over the table. I'm sure y'all don't make a mess when you're baking at home. But you know, this is when I love to get my favorite music on and just enjoy watching these recipes come together. There's something very therapeutic about baking, you know, for me. And now this is, we're gonna incorporate the buttermilk into this. And just take your time on doing it. And I've already preheated my oven, so it's ready to go. All right, so during the break, I'm going to get the rest of this batter finished and incorporated into those 3 pans. And I'll get my icing made. And when you come back with me, the presentation today is going to be beautiful. We're incorporating some of Hester & Cook's wonderful fall products into our presentation today. So don't go away, come right back. Welcome back, everybody, and obviously we have got quite the fall Thanksgiving spread on the table today. Everything has turned out so well, and everything was centered around sweet potatoes as our 4th ingredient this season that we're talking about in our South here with techniques. So I'd love to go through what we did today. We started with the sweet potato biscuit. It's a very flaky, delicious biscuit, easy to make with a biscuit mix. And then the butter that we did with it is literally toasted pecans, room temperature butter, and honey that you mix together and then put it on that hot biscuit, or better yet, zap those in the microwave real quick with that on there. Your guests are gonna love it. All right, then the sweet potato casserole. This has a praline topping that gets nice and crisp on the top. So I really love this recipe. You know, sweet potatoes are great, but I love the topping on it. Turned out wonderfully. All right, so the star of the show again ends up being a cake in this show today. This is the sweet potato layer cake. And if you look closely at the slice there, you'll see what is called a sad streak. That's where it's nice and dense. And a lot of old-time cooks will say it's not homemade if it doesn't have a sad streak. So obviously your guests will know that you made this cake from scratch. So let's talk about our technique of icing cakes. For those of you that aren't familiar with the mail order company I had for years, this is how we iced our cakes. So it is called the Kitty Swirl, which is in honor of Kitty Hopkins, who developed this technique for our cakes. So you start with the layer, then you put about 1/4 of an inch of icing on the top, repeat with the next layer, do the same thing again, and then top it with the last layer. Then you're going to begin what we call the crumb coat. And this is just enough icing to cover the entire cake so that all the crumbs are set. And I like to keep a little bowl beside me, so as I get crumbs on my spatula, I can get rid of that icing so it stays intact. All right, so then the finishing, that's where the kitty swirl comes in. So you take about a heaping tablespoon of icing, start at the bottom and just move quickly up the top, and you'll develop that nice swirl effect. And then a nice big hunk of the icing on the top that you're going to make into a flower. It turns out so beautifully. And I certainly want to point out Hester and Cook today. They are our partner. They helped us create this beautiful table, and you can do the same thing at home. You can find all of their products online, but I love the place cards that either can be used on the seating table or for a buffet to name the dish that you've got. And then really cute this time is I am thankful for that each guest could put at their place setting. So please check them out online. And remember, no matter what you do, do it in good taste. Hester and Cook certainly helped me do that today. And I hope that you will come back and join me again next week.